Hi, everybody. My name is Dietrich. I'm from the Oxford War Studies Department. I studied there undergraduate, and I'm currently doing a PhD. I'm not going to say where, just for privacy reasons, but I basically wanted to go over the origins of game theory. Uh, so, about 35 years ago, there was a book written. It was called The Secret Origins of Strategy: Five Competitive Forces. And this book is basically where game theory was born from. John Nash wrote the book, and slowly it kind of evolved into game theory. But game theory has kind of gotten, I don't want to say out of control, but it's gotten kind of superfluous in some areas. So I wanted to kind of get back to the basics and show basically where game theory, just some of the principles or ideas it was based off of. So let's get started. So the five competitive forces. These are just the principles that game theory is based off of. They're used by statistical and quantitative experts such as MBAs, sociologists, paleontologists. Surprisingly, have some really heavy math. I don't really know why, but they have some of the heaviest math requirements I've seen in academia. But the five basically the five forces are used mostly in these fields, and these fields are at the forefront. They've abstained from using game theory, which is kind of an evolved form of the five forces. And these are really the guys you want to look at. These are the guys with the heaviest math requirements, especially MBAs. They go through just really, really rigorous math training. We're talking complex analysis, abstract algebra, histograms, chi-squares, so some really, really tough math that they have to do. And I think they're probably the most skilled in, and they have the most experience applying it because they have the most motivation. You know, they're trying to make money and stuff. So it's maybe a little stronger than the love for learning, but I'd like to think the love for learning is still pretty strong. But so yeah, these are the guys that are using the five forces. So that's just some background. Let's get started. So the first force is the threat of new players. And one kind of forward on this is strategy itself. It did not exist until the 1970s. Maybe came into being as we know it the late 60s, early 70s, about the time when the book was written, a little after. What happened is in New York, hedge fund managers they started looking at this book and they realized kind of they really didn't use strategy at all. So this book kind of flipped the financial world upside down, and it's kind of given rise to some of the rampant capitalism that we see today. But you know, it's also contributed to unprecedented growth. That I mean, growth rates in the last 30 years have exceeded probably the previous 200 years. So I mean, there's definitely good and bad with that. I'm not really taking a side on that, but and bar graphs are a very effective strategy to visualize the components of new players because when you put each new player in a different color on a bar graph, you can really get a sense of the whole scene in a very holistic view of who the players are, who's thinking what, and how to best formulate a strategy. And so, what we do is it's a very simple method, but it's very effective. We look at the new players and we look at how what they do. Then we adapt, we change because that's endogenous to us, and we resolve. We stick with our plan and we execute our plan. Well, resolve is more decide. I kind of misspoke there. But so basically, what we do is we change accordingly. We decide what we'll do, and then we go and do it. So that's all you do when you have the threat of new players. So that's just the first force. Let's move on. Bargaining power of buyers. This is the second force. Just like a cherry, we bite our way to success. Some of you probably recognize this. You're probably thinking this already, but I'm going to bring it up. It's the Hans Bernstein cherry method. It was first applied at hedge funds in the 80s. I'm sure a lot of you already know that. And all the cherry method is, it's basically visualizing the distribution of bargaining power as a cherry, kind of a bunch of different layers you could peel back. I don't know why they use cherry. You could probably use an onion would have been more effective, the onion method, because an onion has more visible layers. But anyway, there's all these different layers, and the different layers represent the distribution of bargaining power for the buyers. This could conversely be used for sellers too, which is the next force, but we're just going to use it for the buyers because it's well, I don't have a good reason. They just only use it for the buyers for some reason. But we solve the problem the same way. We adapt to whatever the bargaining power distribution is. We resolve, we decide what we're going to do, and then we go and do it. So if bargaining power of buyers is very high, let's say, and if if the buyers is who we're looking at, we're obviously the seller, we need to decide on an appropriate price, and then we need to go and execute that appropriate price. And so that brings us to the next side, the bargaining power of suppliers. Um, a study by Harvard suggested the bargaining power of suppliers was a proto-Gaussian distribution. So we need to act accordingly and survey variance with Cauchy methods. Um, they're commonly used in retail just because they're so effective. You'll also see them sometimes in different areas of physics, thermodynamics, the motion of fluids, and then kind of more everyday things. Banks will use them to check your line of credit, and then also it can be used to represent how the pistons work in a car. And this is the same thing. We could use the cherry method here to visualize, but we just need to adapt to whatever the bargaining power of the supplier is, since we're the buyer, resolve and decide, hey, maybe we're not going to buy above this price, and we need to execute that. So, recap and conclusion, three forces are threat of new players, bargaining power of the buyers, and the bargaining power of the suppliers. And all you have to do is adapt, resolve, and execute. This is a lot. The origins of game theory here, they're a lot more substantive. They're kind of not as abstract, and they're more applicable to real world situations. And when in doubt, write the numbers out. If kind of visualizing all this strategy gets too complicated, it's really useful to write the numbers out sometimes. I mean, I still do it, and I'm a PhD candidate, so uh, yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to go over. I hope I showed uh, kind of the basic methodology behind game theory, and yeah, that's it. Thanks.